Hey everyone, today we are going to solve the Daily LeetCode challenge of 21st March 2024, and the problem statement is reverse linked list. So let us first understand the problem statement. So according to the problem statement, we have been given a linked list, and what we have to do is we have to reverse it. Correct? Now, what does reversing this linked list means? Reversing the linked list means reversing these links, right? The links which we are having from this 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. We have to reverse these links. Now, what does reversing these links means? So you can see that in the linked list currently, we have a link from 1 to 2, correct? So it means that the resultant linked list which we will have, in that linked list, what we have to do, we have to reverse this link. Now, what does reversing this link means? In the original linked list, we were having a link from 1 to 2, but we have to reverse this link. So what we will have? We will have a link from 2 to 1, correct? Now, similarly, we can see that we had a link from 2 to 3. So in the new linked list, what we will have? We will have a link from 3 to 2, correct? And we will have a link from 4 to 3, correct? And we'll have a link from 5 to 4. So in this way, we have to reverse these links, right? Here we can see that we had a link from 3 to 4. But what we have to do in the new linked list, we have to reverse this link. So what we will have? We will have a link from 4 to 3. And similarly, we will have a link from 5 to 4. Now let's see how we can do this. Okay. So here we can see that what is the next of this one? The next of this one is 2. But in the resultant linked list, this is our resultant linked list. Okay. So let me write it as resultant. So in our resultant linked list, what is the next of this one? The next of this one is what? It's null. Correct. So what do we want to do? We initially want to set the next of this one as null. So let's say if we have null over here. So what we want to do? We want to set the next of this one as null. Okay. So you may notice one thing, that the moment we will set the next of this one as null, what will happen? This link will break. Correct. And since this link will break, so we will lose all these links, correct? We will be losing all these data, but we want to preserve this. So in order to preserve this, what we will do, we will store this entire thing. Say for example, this node, that is the 1th node, is the current node. So let me represent it as skull. Okay. So the moment we will set the next of cur as null, this link will break, and we don't want to lose these data. So what we will do, we will store these data in another pointer. So let's name this pointer as next, correct? So we will store this in the next pointer. Now, what we want to do, we want to set the next of current as this null. So let's store this null in another pointer. Let's call it as previous, okay? So first of all, what we want to do, we want to set the next of current as null. That is, we want to set the next of current as previous, because in what variable we have this null? We are storing this null in previous, correct? So we will set the next of current as previous. Now, once we have set the next of current as previous, what we will do, we have successfully created a link that is from 1 to null. Now, what we have to do, we have to create these links for 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what we will do, we'll simply move all these pointer ahead. That is, we will move the previous pointer to the location of the current pointer. We will move the current pointer to the location of the next pointer. And we will move the next pointer to the next of current, correct? So the next pointer would be here. So what we did, we set previous as current, we set current as next. It was nxt, sorry, it was nxt next. And what did we did? We set this next as the next of this current, or we can say as the next of next. So what we said next as the next of this next, correct? Now since this link was broken, so it means we don't have this link anymore, correct? Now what we want to do, we can see that in this linked list, now what we have a link from this 2 to this 1, correct? So now what we want to create a link from this 2 to 1. So how are we going to do that? We will set the currents next as previous. So what do we have in current? In current, we have 2. So if we set the currents next as previous, so what does it mean? It means that this 2 will point here, correct? And what will happen? This link will break. So we have successfully set the next of this 2 as 1, correct? Now, once we have set the next of this 2 as 1, so what will happen? Now, what do we have in next? In next, we have this part, correct? Now, once we have set the next of current as previous, what we have to do? We have to move all these 3 pointers by 1 step. So our previous will now point at 2, our current will now point at 3, and our next will now point at 4, correct? Now our current pointer is at 3. So what do we want? We want a link from 3 to 2, right? So what do we want? We want to set the next of this 3 as 2. So what we will do? We will set currents next as previous. So what we will have? We will have a link over here, and this link will get broken, correct? So we have got this link got broke. And what do we have in next? In next, we have this part, correct? Now, since we have set the currents next as previous, now what do we have to do? We have to move all these by one step. So what will happen? Our previous pointer will now point over here, our current pointer will point over here, and our next pointer will now point over here. Fine. Now what we want, we can see that what do we have in the resultant linked list? In resultant linked list, we have a link from 4 to 3, correct? So what do we want? We want to set the next of this 4 as 3. So what we will do, we will set currents next as previous. So our current is 4. So 4's next would be what? 4's next would be 3. This link will get broke. So we will break this link, okay? And we have set the next of 4 as previous. And after that, what will we do? We will move this 3 pointer. So our previous is over here. Our current is over here. And our next is pointing at null, correct? That is over here. Now what we have to do, now we can see that we have a link from 5 to 4, right? So what we will do, our current is at 5, so we will set 5's next. That is current's next as previous. That is, we'll do this, we'll set current's next as previous. And once we have done that, what we'll do, we'll move this previous pointer by one step. We'll move this current pointer by one step. So if we'll move this current pointer by one step, what it will happen? It will now point as null. And we can see that the next is already null. So we can't move this next pointer ahead, right? Because what is next of null? If you will try to do the next of null, it will give you a runtime error. So before this, we have to add a check that if next is not null, in that case only we have to move the next pointer. So we can see that next is null over here, so we don't need to move it any further. Now, the moment we will see that our current pointer is null, it means that we have successfully processed all the nodes of the linked list and we were able to reverse it. And what would be our result? We can see that our previous pointer is now pointing at 5. And here we can see that what is the head of this resultant linked list? The head of this resultant linked list is 5, right? Because it's starting from 5. Then after 5, we have 4. Then after 4, we have 3. After 3, we have 2. After 2, we have 1. So we can see that this previous is pointing at 5. So finally, what we have to do? Finally, we'll return this previous pointer. Okay? Now, I hope it's clear to you all. So let's quickly code this. So first of all, we'll check that if our head is null or the next of head is null, in that case, what we will return? In that case, we'll simply return the head. Okay. So it means that if we have something like this or if we have something like this, in that case, the reverse of it would be the same. So we'll simply return head. Fine. Now after that, what we have to do? We have to take 3 pointers. First one would be current, which would be the head. After that, we would have previous pointer, which would be initially null. And we will have the next pointer, which will point at the next of the head. Okay. Now, if you face this question in the interview, then the interviewer might ask that why we are using this next pointer. So you have to make them understand that once we will set the next of this current, say for example, our current is at 1 and our previous is null, correct? So once we will set the next of this current as previous, so what will happen? This link from this 1 to 2, it will break, correct? That is, this link will break. Now, the moment this link break, what will happen is we will lose this entire data, correct? So what we have to do, we have to store this data somewhere in order to preserve it. That's the reason why we are using this next pointer, correct? Now, what we have to say, we will say that while we have current, that is while this current is not null, what we have to do, we have to set the next of the current, we have to set the next of this current as previous. And what does this mean? This means that, say for example, our current is at 1. So what we have done, we have set the next of this 1 as null, correct? Now, the moment we have done this, what we have to do, we have to move all these 3 pointers by one step. So what we will do, we will set previous as current. We will set current as next. And we will check that if our next is not null, correct? In that case, only what we'll do, we will set next as the next of next. Fine. Now, once we have come out of this while loop, what does it mean? It means that our current has become null. So what we have to return? We have to return the resultant linked list. That is the reverse linked list, correct? And how we can do it? We can see that our previous pointer is pointing at 5, which would be the head of the reverse linked list. So what we have to do? We have to simply return this previous. So we will return previous. Now let's quickly run this. So it's giving us the correct answer. Let's submit it. And it got accepted. Talking about the time complexity and space complexity. So if we have n nodes present in the linked list, then the time complexity would be order of n. Why? It's because what we are doing in this while loop. In this while loop, we are iterating over the entire linked list. Okay. That is, we will be iterating over all the n nodes of the linked list in order to reverse it. That's the reason why our time complexity is order of n. And we are not using any extra space complexity from our end, because of which the space complexity is order of 1. So that's all about today's daily LeetCode challenge. Thank you.